My second question is like, how do you manage all this, all these intellectual models?
Yeah,
right?
This is one of the kind of the secret sauces of a company like Microsoft. Make sure that our folks really understand the benefit and value of diversity. We need to be diverse because you've got to have that kind of all these different perspectives and that ability to be able to speak in the customer's, not just physical, literal language. Salespeople generally are not productive in the office, generally speaking, unless there's some compelling benefit for them. Usually when I was a sales director, I tried to model this behavior too.
Hello.
I'm
going to introduce you a little bit. So
sure.
This is Pierre. He's a former business analyst, consultant, senior solutions architect, and right now he is the sales activation director for Microsoft. So welcome.
Welcome. It's good to be here. Good to be here.
I mean, that's great. At least you're not here so well, That's always a good start.
Yes.
Well, I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
I'm going to do a little bit of a softball thing here.
Uh-oh.
Then the hard
questions. Then do the hard questions come afterwards? Is this going to be like the TikTok CEO this week, getting in front of Congress?
I saw that. Poor guy. He was really trying his hardest, and they were like, "No, you're not the best ever."
I
love how near the end of that they said he was really trying to answer their questions, and then near the end you're like, he didn't answer a single question. And he's like, I really kind of did, but it's a tough. He's been put there to. I don't know if he's been put there to fail or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how that whole good luck trying to shut a company down. That basically does what every other IT social media company does.
That's true.
I mean, how is it any different than Facebook or any anyways, there was a lot of stupid questions, and the way that very just I want a yes or no answer, which is really a trap because they're under oath. Yeah. And so you're coached to avoid that kind of thing, and then mischaracterizing, do you have the ability to spy on American citizens? It's like, well, like you did with the other ones, kind of a thing. Like,
I think the Congress forgot about Snowden and that whole debacle. So it's nice to have someone something pointed in a different direction.
It's really interesting, and it's always interesting. And then it's like I've been in that meeting. I've been in this guy's shoes. Anybody in IT has been in that kind of you guys have no idea how this works technically, and so you're asking super technical questions, like the one senator who was like, "This was my business," and all of that, and it's like,
no, fair enough, and because you've had experience in technical sales. And you've had experience in technical sales, and a lot of people just understand salespeople as salespeople.
Yeah,
and you're, I guess, in a way, a perfect. If you were in those shoes, you'd probably be the perfect person to answer because you actually understand the technical side really well and the sales side really well. So, I guess one big thing is from your experience, what it really is the difference between technical sales and sales.
Yeah, it really is a good question. I started a podcast about a year and a half ago, just as a side hustle, really, so to speak. And it really is, it's called The Technical Seller. And is trying to explore that idea. What is the difference between sales, quote unquote, and technical sales? Yeah. And generally, as I really consider this, generally it looks like to me what is, if I look at just a general business to business selling model. So first, technical selling generally involves a proof stage that is generally lacking or not required or as complicated. So when we're selling something that has a technical kind of bent to it, the proof stage of saying this actually works, and here is evidence of it working in your situation or something like that. And that's usually the biggest thing that I think is a big distinguishing difference between the two. Now, there's different ways to prove things out, but and if I'm selling, laundry soap or something like that, it's usually a testimonial or something like that, or there's a low cost to trying something. Here, we'll send you a little box of soap. You can try it out yourself. I remember used to get those in the mail when I was, a little kid. We'd get them little soap boxes in the mail or something like that to try out something new. But the proof stage becomes more complicated. The other part is, and Congress is a really great example of decision makers. Usually in technical sales, there's different decision makers. So it's anytime you kind of turn onto selling tech into a business scenario, it automatically is a complex sale in the very traditional sense. When we talk about complex selling, you have multiple decision makers. So you have a business decision maker, and you have a technical decision maker. And so it's usually multiple people then now are automatically involved in the decision-making process. So, if we're selling, let's say, warehouses or something like that space, there's usually just one buyer, so to speak, for that, or paper. There's really not a technical process that has to go through, or multiple kind of buyers, so to speak, that you have to influence and kind of walk through. So those would be the two things. I think multiple decision makers, technical decision makers, a business decision maker distinguishing, and the proof stage, which doesn't always exist in traditional selling.
So the proof sort of I would assume the proof is sort of nested in that, in the multiple decision maker stage, I guess. There are different ways to prove that something,
right? Yeah.
Or or the best is if you give it a try and they like it, which would be, if it's that good of a product. But I guess, what's your experience with that? Like, how has that been for you? What are the nuances within that?
Yeah, so sometimes it's impossible for a company to completely evaluate. You think about it like marriage or dating or something like that. You cannot completely evaluate that experience until you sign the on the paper, on the dotted line, and move in together and share finances, and you truly get into a partnership where you have equal risk. And some of the stuff is the same way. The bigger the company gets, the more proof is required, because they can't fully evaluate the solution until they are married to it, right? So it becomes very difficult to, when you think about selling something into a factory floor, where you've got a 24/7 operation. If I'm going to say, hey, we're going to make your machine operators 5% more efficient in something like automotive, where they've squeezed every, literally the physical motion of people and time studies and all this, and we're coming in and making some sort of claim that we can, really improve productivity. Well, in order to evaluate that, you actually have to put the software in, you have to interrupt production. There's lots of risk that's associated with that. You may be absolutely accurate in that some of your customers have had that. You can point to testimonials, but until it gets evaluated, the proof of that is very hard to find. So, it becomes that's where it gets, that's where it becomes very interesting, so to speak, and very kind of complicated, and, a little more sophisticated requirements than just straight up, hey, selling techniques that, you learn as a salesperson when, if I'm selling at, an individual, let's say I walk into a Best Buy or a retail store, and I've got, mom and dad buying a computer for the kid. And it's, that experience of selling is very straight up, features, benefits type of discussion. And, hopefully you catch them on the right day and the price is right. And you apply some, sales techniques in terms of, asking questions, finding the right thing, doing your discovery work, and then going in for the close, would you like it on Tuesday or Wednesday, or, the blue one or the green one? You have all these different kind of techniques that, help you as a salesperson, let's say, gain an advantage or maintain some sort of control in the sales process. But once you get into, that kind of corporate side, like a company like Microsoft, that's a big difference at any level. When we have, a win wire is like, hey, we just sold this deal to, look at any one of these giant customers that are, customers of Microsoft, and we make a big announcement,
Why wire?
I don't know why they call it a win wire, but it's a traditional name for like an internal announcement of, hey, we just won this deal with Walmart. And so you'll see a win wire, and it gets like, it's an email that gets sent out, and it's kind of a braggy, like, hey, the team did great. But you look at the team, and it's never just one person. Literally, there's 50 people that are involved, in this process. It's a large amount of individuals that have to work together to coordinate, for that customer. Everybody's got different skill sets, and because there is all of those buyers at the customer, there's, security specialists and database analysts and, all the people that are involved from the technical side. And then there's also, business organizational people that help address things like risk and what is the business value and what's the support plan after. And so it's, and the license, and there's negotiation with pricing and how the pricing and costing, is going to be, and over a period of time too. That's the other part, which is really interesting. It's never just, it's $14 million. It's like, it's $1 million this year for X amount of users. Then, 6 months later, we're going to add, there's a growth plan, so to speak, for those transactions. So it's way more complicated than most people would think. And it's kind of shocking, actually, when I came over to Microsoft to see it to this degree. It's really amazing. And so that, that's the part of it that's really fun at the same time. Like it's a team effort. It's such a teamwork kind of component. And you need to have a mindset of, you're working together as a group, and you have to have really good collaboration tools and, to really align your messaging so that you kind of are able to, not cause a lot of doubt into the customer about what your intention are and what, who is you, from the customer. It's a bunch of people. And at the end of the day, it's not that monolithic group. It's a bunch of individuals that are, making connections and whatnot. So that's the fun part, actually, of what we do from a sales kind of perspective.
For me, something that's interesting is, I guess there's several things, but what is there a point you can say that companies feel that now is the time for us to make that jump or take that risk? It's hard to sort of, have some, like an individual point. It's probably multiple points over a period of time among different groups, and each group has different points within that where they kind of justify it. And you're sort of trying to, slug that along and coordinate and make sure that you're always going forward and not backwards. But there is a point where maybe there's an accumulation of these things where it's almost inevitable for that what is the inflection where it's going, the trust is going up, not down.
Right. Yeah. It is. That's the art of a lot of what's being done. And what you're doing is ultimately, nobody's going to buy anything just because it's got cool features, in our business anymore. Like that's not usually what it is. And a lot of research has been done. Like if we look at something like CRM systems, for example, just generically, like CRM is such a highly competitive, mature business, right? In fact, our Microsoft Dynamics CRM system is turning 20 years old this year. Many of us that started our career on that platform, in the CRM consulting space, we've been doing this for 20 years now. And I think we were about 2 or 3 years behind Salesforce at the time. So, this is not just a startup kind of business anyway. This is these are $1 billion businesses now at this point. So super mature. Lots of research has been done about effectiveness of those like solutions. Do they raise sales? Do they, reduce cost and improve do they deliver on the promise, and what are the ingredients of that? And often what it is not actually the technology or the software specifically. It has a lot more to do with the program that you surround that solution with. And we kind of know this, really, when you think about it. Like if you look at the cars as a market, like pretty much all the cars can go 100 miles an hour. Like they can you can get in them, go fast. Like it's not a question of that, really. Features, functions, that type of stuff. Like there's nuances in that of course, companies leapfrog over each other in terms of tech and abilities and stuff like that. But a lot of it in terms of success is really ultimately about delivering on the promise, not just the specific application or tech that's being done. It's really, is the consumer able to use those functions? So what I'm trying to say is, it comes down to business value and knowing when that business value is able to be realized. And, that's the art of this discussion often, is trying to figure out what that motion, is for the customer, and not just, hey, we got this tool and there you go and just buy it. But if the customer's not ready to do it, then you could have all the greatest value and close a sale if you were really good and go, whoo, aren't we awesome? But if the customer, like, this is the interesting part about the business we're in now, it's a subscription. So it's not a one-time thing anymore. Like, we have to, that thing has to continue to deliver value over and over again. Every month, a customer is voting whether we're successful or not with their dollar. We are very tied into that metric of monthly active users, customers, and what's the delta between actual users and paid users. And so if a customer has lots of, we closed the sale, that's awesome, but we don't have any actual users in the system using and engaging in the application, well then, it's only a matter of time before that customer is going to go, or this isn't even working for us. So we surround those customers with, we have a whole group of people that we have that help customers realize value in those types of investments that they're making and that they're tracking, along the way. And so yeah, it really has to do with understanding business value and then making sure that the customer is able to deliver value. And a good salesperson is able to kind of help manage that expectation internally. When is the customer ready for that? Because, the cost of a sale for us is super high. When you have 100 people involved, and it's literally millions of dollars that you're investing in a large sales motion for a customer. And and so you have to make sure that customer is going to return that at some level. And if that doesn't happen, and they get rid of the software, you can oversell, as the term like we like to use. Because a lot of, when you have a strong brand and when customers, are enamored with technology and all of that, then it's awesome. That's great. Right. And it makes sometimes the sale a lot easier. And not like that congressional, testimony that we saw earlier this week. Sometimes it's just like, we just love you. You're awesome. And, you have people in the customer. This is another thing that's, I think, really interesting. Customers, and you know this as a developer and working with developers, customers' careers are often like individuals. Like we say, it's teams of individuals. If you're a quote unquote Microsoft shop, that means your customers, IT department is invested in their careers in your tech. And so if we go into a shop where there's Oracle there, that chance of value where everybody is, all Oracle certified, all of their, dev work and consulting backgrounds, they're all Oracle people. If we don't have a good story or aren't able to work with that, and we're perceived as some sort of threat to that, it's not good. It's not good for us. And it's not good for the customer either, because that means a lot of disruption is going to happen. Now, some companies, that's their strategy, actually. But yeah, there's that nuance that sometimes the customers have happy eyes, is what I like to call it. They look at it and they're like, that's the best thing ever. And we can just really do that. And they oversell that capability and their ability as a team to deliver that result. And sometimes you as a person, as a team, have to kind of step back and go, this is not probably the right fit. So it's probably not the right fit for us.
So how do you massage that experience? So what I mean by that is, like, you gave several examples of sort of making sure that the customer essentially, comes in, really understands the technology. In my mind, it's almost like, sort of what I heard is, here are the features that are right for you, and this is how you navigate our technology. Because we have, a bunch of things that can help you, instead of sort of navigating through this space blindly. We understand you. We understand what you're trying to do. And here are the things that can help you as the most efficient way to use our technology and onboard yourself. And so, let me understand the granularity of all your problems all the way down to solving some of the things that you want to get solved, right?
Yep.
So, and that has to happen among different sort of departments, and especially for large companies and large deals, different departments and different skill sets and different people who've invested in that, right? But you're still going to always get a pushback. So, going back to the original statement, sort of how do you massage that experience, on the customer side of, being maybe a little bit hesitant and then sort of,
Mm-hmm.
either it's fine and dandy to have the solution, but it may not be as fine and dandy to have them try it, and things
Mm-hmm.
of that nature. How do you massage the actual experience? Because you've sort of laid down the
Yeah.
groundwork of the spider web of all the places you need to make it happen. But then there's a one-on-one interaction where you're trying to encourage something.
Mm-hmm.
And the cases that you spoke about last, for people who are particularly invested in not get understanding it, right?
Yeah.
They have a completely different skill set in another technology, something like Oracle, like you spoke about. So, just to sort of summarize, like how do you make that happen? What is the one-on-one relationship you're building per individual,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even per this person has this skill,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, engage in this way. This person has this
Mm.
skill because of that, and engage in this way. And
Yeah.
and everybody has sort of their own jargon and the way they value
Yeah.
a conversation, right? Engineers a bit more, is this not working? What is a shortcut? And then the other skill sets a little bit more softer in their perception of information. And it's more about a sort of like an emotional relationship and emotional labor to engage, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, broadly, it's doing a really great job at discovery, right? So, I mean, the kind of classic, application deployment or development 101, discover, design, develop, deploy kind of model, like that framework that's been around sort of since the 70s, is really this. It's in many ways, there's nuances to that, more modern and agile methodologies, but that's really a big part of it. What we train our sales teams actually to do, and that's part of my job actually, is to facilitate design thinking and human-centered design workshops. And we really focus in on persona mapping and designing based around that type of methodology. Like, what is the value? Put yourself in the mind of an individual machine operator. Like, for example, we're working on right now. I'm working on a team with a team that is trying to help encourage collaboration in a factory setting. And so you have foremans, and the first, when you think of factory, you think of the frontline, literally operator of a machine or the person assembling something. Now, their ability to realize the technology that is like, oh man, we can have teams and all of these kind of cool capabilities. But when you start looking at that machine operator can't be distracted during the day. Like, they have to walk onto the shop floor and they're focused on that machine that they're operating or the job that they're doing. And so tech is a distraction for that person. So you start to understand that persona, but then you go at the shift break. That's when they're going into the lunchroom and kind of picking up the culture of the day, and like, what is a training program or available for me? What's my career path here? Am I always going to be a machine operator, or can I go into supervision? What about I had a question about, this other machine. Where do I put that question? And I want to, and the company wants to build a culture. So maybe there's other experiences that that person can realize in the value of something like Microsoft Teams or a collaboration type of environment. But you don't, and so at first, developers are like, oh man, the operator, he really, or she really, man, they could really benefit from this. And you're like, as we kind of discover more about that customer, it's not just a giant customer, it's a set of individuals there, and using those personas to guide really what ultimately in the sale we're looking for is that what is the value, the business value of this solution, and then mapping that to individuals that kind of persona wise. Yeah. So I'm trying to understand the customer's environment and how the systems are working together really helps us then help build a program for the customer. When I say program, let's say a project plan or a deployment kind of engagement model delivers on value. So they know kind of part of that. So we are a partner then with the customer to help them, understand that, deliver. We hire consultants externally that Microsoft sponsors and pays for those design workshops. We have technology centers, we call MTCs, where we bring customers, in from all over to a Microsoft office, and they spend days with, solution architects and business value architects. We have economists, our business value specialists. That's all they do. They don't sell any software. Literally, they do those types of ethnographic studies to get into the individuals that are doing the work and what they do individually, and what the business value of, like, man, if we help change that behavior, we could get a little more productivity out of that person or that group of people. Or we're coming in with a point of view from our perspective that's often tailored to a particular customer. We start with an industry perspective often, and then it's nuanced, because not every manufacturer is the same as, let's say, General Motors or something like that. Just because they build something, their business models are often so nuanced and different. So
is that the same sort of what I want to ask is, like, I guess what is the reusability of this, right?
Yeah.
Can you have
yeah, that's
you have to do that every single time?
Yeah, that's
every time
that's a fantastic question, because that's the work that teams like mine are often doing, where we have industry specialists, or we're looking for patterns. We have customer innovation, like our team. We have I'm on what we refer to as activation, but I work on a team with business analysts, customer innovation specialists, and insight specialists, data scientists. And what we're often trying to do, well, not often, every day, this is what our mission is try to come up with hypothesis of sales motions for the company, and then kind of trying to identify those repeatable, let's say, patterns of behavior that a customer may have, and then try to come up with a solution play that we then can train our sales organization on, to say, this is a pattern. Let's just use energy as a thing. So there right now is a big transition that's happening in the energy industry, right? And growth in the use of renewables, wind farms, solar, those types of things. And so now all of a sudden, that kind of how those customers build service management programs for those large, wind farms, and is very different. It's a new business generally. So, at scale, how do you manage a 70, ginormous, windmills and wind generators? So, trying to identify these industries and sub-industries, or mega patterns in industry, like, for example, something where manufacturers or companies are trying to have a low asset business model, where we don't own any of the stuff, we just Uberify everything. Like, that's a certain pattern. So, like, when you walk into a customer and you see, oh, they're trying to Uberify, it's like, all right, I have a kind of a solution pattern then that says you need to have a portal, and you need to have, legal compliance across every state. We know that's going to be a blocker. And so in some ways it's like, and that's why a lot of us on these teams have come from consulting, because it's kind of a consulting almost model that you need to do to be able to do that. So yeah, we call them sales plays or solutions, if you will, patterns. Right. And we have industry teams, and then we even nuance that more regionally, because manufacturing in Germany is very different than manufacturing, let's say, in India. The whole value.
I was going to ask, how does that work across? I guess because you talk a bit about ethnocentric sort of plays, and sort of how does this? Because you have industry, you have granularity among industries, you have changes in industry, relative to, like, and then sort of like different degrees of ownership of sort of operations.
Yeah.
Right? So now you're talking how you do it across countries.
Yeah.
With maybe countries have nested sort of subculture. Everyone thinks every country is one thing, but every country is really like multiple cultures, multiple social class behaviors, and just a bunch. There's so much granularity in human groups that. And then I guess my second question is, like, how do you manage all these intellectual models? Right. Of human behavior.
Yeah. So the first one is a really good question, because that is, this is one of the kind of the secret sauces of a company like Microsoft, is that understanding and building understanding that the solution is consumed and valued differently in different countries and different regions, and so that the same model that we use for, let's say, automotive in Germany, that industry, let's say Mercedes, is very different if I deploy that similar solution for service management in a country, in a different country like India. And those are maybe two opposite sides, or China, two opposite sides where the labor value is different, right? So I may be a manufacturer, but if my manufacturers, individuals, are super low skilled and highly abundant, then the need to highly make people super productive or address turnover or something like that is very different. That calculus, that all of a sudden that business model that you had for selling something super high tech in an industry or a market where labor is super tight, that kind of value proposition changes. And so you have, this is at least my philosophy coming at it from, a sales perspective, having been a salesperson and trained salespeople for years and years, is that you really have to trust your front line. You have to, I work for a corporate team and we're here to support them. And so what you have is industry, you have, in market people, like we have, like 20 different, regions at Microsoft. So the German team, they kind of take what we put together, and then we work with them individually, their leadership in Germany, to help shape that message and to do things over there. And then when we're over in, Australia or, Japan, it's totally different, totally different. They'll take the same basic patterns, but then may emphasize one thing over another, or, and so, it's just work. That's that's the work often, to kind of dial it into different regions, to help, support them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now that I think would be interesting to hear is, now that, we had the whole COVID thing where people started working remotely.
Oh yeah.
Right. So the concept of like cultural integration is different than it used to be. Like, you can immerse yourself in a completely different culture. I mean, there's a degree of absoluteness that isn't true there. But if you have people on the ground, and they're mostly working remotely, then you now have to start having people whose purpose is to absorb that culture a bit more. Do you need someone doing that, or is that osmosis enough? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or do you already have people whose job is already to do that? Like, you're here to sort of coach players entering into your market and how to behave, right? And so how is that? Is that formally managed? Is that informal? It sounds more informally managed than formally managed, right? But now that there's this shift in human interaction, like that surface area you're reducing, has anything had to change? If not, that's probably great, right? But if it does, it's interesting to hear how.
So for us, when you look at the COVID impact on selling, it really had more to do with travel on job sites. Most of the sales organization at Microsoft works at home anyways. They're rarely going into the office, and that's not unique to Microsoft. I mean, salespeople generally are not productive in the office, generally speaking, unless there's some compelling benefit for them. Usually it's like, I remember when I was a sales director, I tried to model this behavior too. When I was a sales manager, I would tell my guys and gals, I do not want to see you in the office. Go, there's a reason you have an expensive account. Go take people out for lunch. Go build relationships with people. And so, if you're in the office, come in for a meeting or something like that. But, that's you're not being super productive when you're in the office. So anyways, and what I would do from time to time, I had back in the day, it was cool to have they don't even sell these things anymore, but conversion vans. They call them conversion vans, where you take like a big, like a Econoline van, like a 40 Econoline van, and you put carpet in it and had almost like a camper. It's like a camper. And, it was, now we have like big Suburbans, but you didn't have those back then. So anyways, I had a conversion van, and it was basically like a little mobile office. I had a desk in there, and like I could chill out. I had a fridge and all of this stuff in my van. And I literally would park that in my parking lot at work in the back, and nobody would know that. And so they would call on my cell phone. Then I would come into the office, but I was trying to show them, like, you don't need to be in this building. Please don't be in the building. Oh, Pierre's not available. He's out right now, and he's out in the field. And I really was sitting in the parking lot in my van doing work. I was just working in the van. But it's funny. But anyways, to answer your question directly about we are people that are in market, like I would say 80-90% of, the people. Let's say, for example, if I'm in Japan, we have a Japanese business unit with Japanese people that live in Japan selling to Japanese customers. In China, same thing. Chinese employees in China selling to Chinese customers. So that you get that perspective naturally. Now, of course, people get to do whatever they want in terms of, if I'm an American and I decide, hey, I want to go work in Italy, then could go apply for it. And so we have that. Certainly people move around, and so we super ethnically diverse, and we do have certain, let's say, call centers, so to speak, for some of our cells where, let's say, our entry level salespeople work on what we call digital sales, which is like outbound calling and lead generation. And some of those do exist, but they do exist in countries, so to speak, in different regions. When I've trained, I did a big training program for those folks last year, and and a bunch of them, let's say there's one we have in Dublin, Ireland. And we'd have people from all over the world that were young people that, just out of college or just getting a job at Microsoft, and they would want to move to Dublin. And so that, there's a super diverse group of people that are from all different ethnic backgrounds, all living in Dublin, as a team. So it's interesting. But we try to have, people are in market to give that perspective. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. It's not, that's the international sales. You can't just take an American-centric group and try to just take that team and go sell in Pakistan, and show up with, a bunch of, I live in the Midwest in a very non-racially diverse area of the country. We don't have a lot of diversity here. And so I have had friends that have worked for some of the companies that are local here that have tried to do that. When you go to India and you show up with, a bunch of Dutch people, then that gives you a certain identity as a Dutch company or something like that. And this is part of, the push for the tech companies like us to try to make sure that our folks really understand the benefit and value of diversity. And it's not just like this kind of woke liberal idea. It's like a business strategy. Like, we need to be diverse because you've got to have that kind of all these different perspectives and that ability to be able to speak in the customer's, not just physical, literal language and local, like French people in France that are businesses want to do business in French. They don't want to do business in American English. And it's just a cultural thing. And so it's just, it's building empathy with one of the most important skills as a technical seller is, if you haven't picked it up, is trying to build empathy. Like, I want to listen and I want to understand the customer's viewpoint, what those individuals are, who they are, what they do, what gets them, why are they motivated to do that work? And all of those things are very individualistic, and the values that those individuals have are different in Africa than they are in Silicon Valley, and than they are in, the pride of work and, the reason you show up every day. Those are all different values, and that people have. And so, we have in-country, to answer it more specifically, we have in-country individuals that help the corporate organization reflect and nuance that message in their market, so to speak. So,
right. I guess a question for you specifically is, like, how do you really get into technical sales? Like, what was your journey sort of in this very, I wouldn't say niche. You know, it's kind of like all sales are now kind of technical sales, regardless. It's relative whether or not you want the title really now, but
Yep.
you guys get all sales at any level at any most tiers is
Yeah.
really, what kind of this product's technical ability or a technical augmentation is better than
Sure.
the other one, or is now present
Yeah.
where it wasn't already. Right, cars now are really just computers on
Yeah.
wheels,
Yeah.
more
That's
so.
true. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So
There, tech ends up being a large nuance or a large part of a lot of sales. Like, unless you're selling, well, there's not much that you can sell anymore.
so
Maybe health care,
even that is
insurance or something like that, but they all have
insurance. It's literally like if it's not a commodity, it has
yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
Like if it's not soap or food.
Right. Exactly. 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 So yeah, so I sold my first computer in 1989. And it was a company similar to Best Buy. It was a local computer, an appliance store. And I got really interested in computers when I was driving a high-low and working in a warehouse after college. And a guy showed up to our place, and we were an automotive supplier. And this warehouse they needed to have a connectivity because we had to connect to General Motors every day, and so we set up a computer there in the office. And so this is like 86. So he's an old IBM, PC, very traditional, $2,000-$3,000, 8 megahertz computer with probably a 10 megabyte hard drive or something like that, in a color, not a color monitor, like a green monitor. And it was to send what's called advanced shipping notices to General Motors to say, this is what we're shipping to you today. And here's the boxes that you're going to get and the serial numbers and all that. So, this guy had to travel from Detroit, which is like 3 hours. He shows up in a fancy Volvo, and he took like, I don't know, 15 minutes to install this fancy schmancy modem. And I had the purchase order because I had to sign off. So I was the guy that was there. And I'm like looking at this invoice, and this guy charged like $2,000 to install this. And the modem that he put in, which was like by today's standards, a joke, like it was literally a 1200 baud modem, which is like ancient. Like these are the very first modems, and it's so slow. You can't even imagine how slow this is compared to what we're dealing with today. And I was like, I'm just intrigued by this guy showed up here and just made $2,000. Like, how does this work? And I just grilled the guy for it because it was just him and me. And I'm like, that is the career for me. I need to figure out how to get into that, because I was just courting my wife and we were just like, I'm going to start a family soon. Driving high-low is awesome, fun job. If I could do that and get paid what I get paid, I would do that. Believe me, that was a lot of fun. I love that job. And, anyway, so that was my inspiration. I literally bought a book, How to Become a Computer Consultant. And it was one of these, like, getting that vision for, I think I could do this. I'd already understood the value of computers in high school. We had, just back in the late 70s, I did take, believe it or not, I took you have like a high school, like trade school thing that you can do, these like trade schools now. And so I actually went to the skills center, they've called it, and had half my day, learning data processing. And this was like literally card punch machines and back. And the thing, you're trying to get your computer students not to become programmers, like they call them operators, which literally was physically cleaning the machines and how they, changing the tapes and all of this. It was a very kind of physical, mechanical component, and I just hated it. I just didn't get it. I didn't like it. And I just failed at being successful at that. And so, but I did figure out, and I was able to start.
That a lot of value, even though whether or not you were good at it, you were like, but this is something that has value in the market.
Yep. So,
or it just has value.
Yep. So I had that vision, and I was very persistent so I'm like, okay, the first place I can do is go sell computers. So I did. I found a job at Highland Superstores. and which was, like I said, a Best Buy, and we sold computers, and I got paid pretty good. Back in the day, computers were like $3,000 for a home computer, and you got paid a couple $100 for every one you sold as commission. And so, you learn the thing. You don't sell, and so it was really interesting. And so then I had to transition into some sort of business sales. And that was a hard kind of transition for me to try to go from selling computers at a retail store to selling, computers into a business environment and trying to find opportunities there. But I was able to do that. I became what they called an inside salesperson then, which is individual that I had one customer. I was basically working with their purchasing department at a large national bank, a big bank. And then, just kind of in the right place at the right time, because at that time, not realizing, their companies are transitioning from mainframe computers to PCs on the desktop. And that whole, early 90s motion, put me right in the right spot, working with the right kind of bank that was literally buying, 300 computers a week and trying to get them installed, for the next 3 years. And I learned so much by just the grunt work of, going buying computers and selling them for, just figuring out how to do it and stuff like that. So, slowly but surely.
How were you able to get that relationship with that bank? That must have been extremely.
Well, it was through a distributor, right? So then, so there was a company that today they're like companies like Ingram and Tech Data. So it was a company back then called Intercom, and Intercom was a early company that was in that business. They were a cost plus type of company, and so we had opportunities in Michigan, and I just found that company just through. Literally, reading ads in papers and sending applications out and trying to network and stuff like that. And that one came as an opportunity to be, a grunt salesperson, and just no commission at all, just learning the business.
Yeah.
And that was just as an inside salesperson back then. You had it was similar to sales engineering. Honestly, you had an account sales rep that would go out and sell the stuff, and then he would give you literally a paper order, and then you'd have to go. I'd have to go on my computer and then go shop for all of those things that the company needed. Buying a couple hundred computers, and then getting them logistically put in delivered to a bank branch or some sort of data center or something like that. And then coordinating with the team. So it was just one of those things. I think anybody that wants to get into technical sales, you have to really be grounded in the back part of that. So that involved installing computers, that involved setting them up. My retail experience was setting up computers. Often we would unbox them for customers. Back then it was just, here's your box. And so what our little group did is we took over part of the store, and we actually had a little computer center there. And so we would set the computers up for the customers before they left, and we added extra value. We put menus in there, and so this is before Windows was actually even a thing, believe it or not. 89, Windows was just coming out, woohoo, that was awesome. So you're literally building menus, and the customers had 3 computer programs, like the word processor and a game, and you'd select one for a game. That's hilarious. It's so funny now when you think about it. Now it's. But it was.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, the thread of that is you kind of if you're going to get into technical sales, part of it is being technical. You have to have that grounded. If somebody's technical selling in, let's say, valves, high pressure valves. Somebody that's doing that business generally is an engineer first, or knows that business really, really well. I have a customer that they sell an engineered to order product, and they hire engineers and make them salespeople. So usually you have to have a passion for the tech. That's part of that you're just a nerd over that stuff. And then the rest of the stuff becomes kind of natural, because you kind of have this enthusiasm already. And that was me. I was very enthusiastic over, computers and stuff like that. I really had a passion for it. And it was a, super nerdy kind of kid. And so.
Yeah. No, that's actually fantastic. So there are a few questions I still
Sure.
haven't asked
Keep
you. One of
going.
them is, um, I guess you talked about different industries, and like, here's this industry that does this, and
Mm-hmm.
this industry that does that, and some of the differences between selling for different industries. I think you spoke more about different kinds of people, but like for different industries, like sort of what are the different ways in which like you sort of sell for them or engage them in their technology? Because you talked about wind farms and what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
sell for that versus selling an automotive factory, and if an automotive factory has stopping business for them,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe for a company that like a wind farm, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you kind of don't really stop, but it's just like working for the people who manage them, I suppose. So if you can expand on that experience, like working for the different working with different industries, what that's really like on a more sort of more granular level.
Yeah, it's so that when I was started at Microsoft, that was my initial role was we called them global black belt. So you're for our so yeah, like a ninja kind of black belt kind of a person. So anyways, we had that sales engineering experience. You're basically building demos and getting into the you're part of that team that's actually going in and doing the work of building. It's like a
Right,
consulting project, because you're building that proof stage. So you own that.
right,
I
right,
owned that proof stage basically for lots of different opportunities. So that was so much fun because yeah, every day, you would be working on different industries, whether that was, so I had a long stint where I did energy. So I just did oil and gas customers like the
right.
Chevrons and Exxons of the world. So down to Texas every couple weeks and down into the Houston office. We talked about our MTCs, our technology centers, going into that and doing demos and doing discovery workshops and stuff like that, and learning all about
Right.
the business. Like, so this is from a technical sales, this is the, let's say, drug, if you will, of that is the learning of those industries and just kind of just getting into the meat and potatoes of, what their operations are, learning their language and all of that. And so for me, I was able to, after about a year and a half of working on that one industry, I was able to produce an industry, what we refer to as a reference architecture. And those are those kind of
Right.
slides you see Microsoft and everybody that to produce like these are the different layers of the application solution and how, for your industry, this is that perspective that Microsoft is starting with. And that becomes
What did you call those?
we call those called reference architectures. Reference
Right.
architecture says, like for if you're in the oil production business and you have oil wells out there that you have to manage a fleet of equipment out there, so we figured out all of the different jobs that are there on the job site and what's the whole, how do they dispatch the different people and how do the vendors that they hire that come out and let's say deliver water or cement, to the job site, how is that all done and coordinated? So you get the perspective of the industry and then you start to kind of understand what the underlying IT capabilities you need to support those different business values, so they have subtle nuances. And so that oil and gas, so that was like a
Right.
big feather in my cap that I like, woohoo, we got to. So the reference architecture was published, and then then there's a demo that now becomes the demo that all the MTCs around the world can work on. They just now can turn your demo on, and so I had that demo for how to do scheduling for maintenance for that industry. And so you learn all about
Right.
that.
Right.
And then a year later, I moved on to just to doing heavy equipment manufacturers. So large companies, like we just had a big announcement with John Deere recently, where we have
Right.
a dealer program for them and how their dealers are going to leverage a Microsoft solution. Well, that was just announced
Right.
like this around December. I finally can talk about it. I pitched that
Right.
solution back in 2018. Like, this is how long it takes sometimes for those things to develop. So same thing, you
Yeah.
go out there out to out to their different locations of business, and you kind of just do all that work and present a reference architecture and help them pull together the technical solution, try it out in a couple of places, get the partners in there, lots of meetings, lots of stuff back and forth, with different parts of the organization to kind of pull everything together. And then, and then the development phase, it took quite a period of time for them to kind of build it, and now launching it. They just are launching it now. And so then, so I got to learn all about the industry, which I love, which is the heavy equipment manufacturers. Being in the Midwest, it's just amazing. Some of the customers that you'll see on our reference account, like Caterpillar, International, Komatsu, these are all within 150 miles of where I live. That's really interesting. Like, why? Who knows? It's just this is the legacy of Henry Ford, or why, being on the Mississippi River, or whatever, made this kind of industries all like spin up here. But like when you go to the Komatsu factory, which makes these ginormous like cranes and road graders, you pass right by a Caterpillar factory. Like they're like literally within, so it's like Detroit somehow became, Ford and General Motors, or Pittsburgh is where all the steel companies are. Like, it's just really interesting. In the Midwest, we see these heavy industries. So anyways,
do you know a company called,
pardon?
Do you know a company called Bethlehem Steel?
Oh, yeah.
That still exists?
I don't know. But that's I
always want to ask that question. I saw it on an episode of Mad Men.
Yeah. That was Bethlehem Steel was a big, it's out of Pennsylvania. It's one of the big steel. Yeah. That's one of the things I find it for me, when I'm kind of very retrospective and look back at my life and all of this. And, once you get old, I just had my birthday and get I made it through another year. You get retrospective. But Bethlehem Steel is one of those companies I believe is no longer exists as a company. In the Midwest, a lot of us have run through and been part of. Some people disparagingly call it the Rust Belt, because you had all these heavy industries that have kind of gone away. And globalism has really changed the world that we live in. Literally was at a customer or at a friend's house the other day, and right across the street is a ginormous empty lot that's been there for 25 years. And it is where a General Motors factory used to exist. And that factory got shut down. 4,000 people worked at that place every day. But America decided, hey, we're going to have free trade with Canada, and which is where you're at, and Mexico. And it's, overall been great, but the impact of that has, 4,000 families in the city that I live in, lost their job as a result of that. And so, you have the social impact of modernization, and that's one of the themes that I've always tuned into. One of the reasons why I love talking about and studying and have a passion for frontline workers, people that are out there punching the clock every day, that making sure that there's that digital divide doesn't impact them as much as it did with the generation that I grew up with, they're, people were making really good money in the tool and die industry. And then, all of a sudden, the tool and die industry moves to Taiwan, and, the quality over there is just as good as it is here in West Michigan, and the factories move out of West Michigan. So the need to have local, tool and die shops is gone. It's not as important anymore. So it's really interesting. So that is a big part, kind of a theme that I'm very attracted to. And the other part of the kind of picking industries and knowing like the different industries, a lot of it has to do with that individual's passion. And that's something that really at Microsoft and a lot of companies are like this. When you're in a big company like this, you get to you have a big say in that kind of stuff. Like, I want to go after this. And the way that, companies like ours work is you set your goals, and it's a big part of the way that organizations. It's not very top down type of a thing. You're looking for opportunities in markets that you're attracted to. Like, so if you say, hey, you know, I want to go to Pakistan and learn all about you know, pharmaceuticals or something like that. You know, that's there's jobs for that, you know, and you can find your way to get to those teams and really emphasize those types of, you know, opportunities, and, you know, put in the work to kind of do that. And then that becomes part of your brand, you know, that becomes part of your brand, and you can then get called in to do the work in other areas of the world. So that's kind of part of the natural growth that folks have.
You talked about, and then, you know, with regards to some of the passions you have for, you know, working with people who are really at that sort of like ground and on the frontier of building things, and you know, sort of contributing to society with their skill sets. That, you know, I guess in your case, really working with your hands or building really big machines, and the sort of the experience of having that technology move over into other areas, I guess, in the world as a consequence of globalization. And to some degree, you know, globalization was really a derivative of network technologies becoming more powerful. So I think that big wave that you experienced, and sort of the outcome of your career as a consequence of that, I think that rotation has the opportunity to happen again, maybe in a different way, with some of the new technologies like ChatGPT or just machine learning in general. And a lot of people are nervous. I actually saw, you know, I watched a video of a lady who's been an artist for a decent amount of years, and some of what ChatGPT is able to do in a second can be a little bit debilitating for her skill set. And she was sort of talking about that, and sort of there are pros and cons to that. You know, at the end of the day, technology has to move forward. We can't be Luddites, but there is a real effect there. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on, you know, it's interesting what sector it now affects. It's sort of like the snake is eating its own tail a little bit. And you know, sort of technology is accelerating up the ladder of skill sets. So it's interesting to see what it's eaten up, and it'd be great to hear what you think about that, because I guess you're seeing something happen again, and seeing how people are reacting versus how people reacted then. And, you know, are there similarities, are there differences? And since you've seen it before, you're probably seeing something else from it too, right?
It is.
It's an easy question.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, put it this way. I'll talk about it from two perspectives. First is maybe a framework. I think that's, to me, what I'll give you the perspective first, and then maybe talk about some of the specific examples of how you apply that perspective. Because what I have learned, you know, as an old dude now, having, you know, witnessed all of this stuff, changing people's lives and impact, is it's a very simple solution, and it's encapsulated in a book, Who Moved My Cheese. I don't know. It's kind of a there's a book called Who Moved My Cheese, and it's by Stephen Covey. He's the guy that wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Really?
So it's a very simple little book, but it tells a story of rats in a maze trying to find the cheese, and the cheese moves, and everybody has different responses to when things change. And so his advice there is move with the cheese. You know, follow the cheese, keep inspecting the cheese all the time, where that value is, what that source of your happiness, if you will, is, or your source of sustenance, whether that's a job or, you know, even in relationships. And actually he wrote it because he was getting divorced, and he wanted to come up with some sort of tale for his kids that, hey, things are different, and give them some strategies. And anyways, you have different characters, and some of them are like, oh, despondent, the cheese has moved. Why did the cheese move? And, you know, trying to understand all of the societal impacts. And we certainly see that happening today, where people are just, you know, it's that TikTok in front of Congress, where it's just like, dude, the cheese has moved. Young people are socializing in a different way than you did. Okay. And they don't feel this is a threat. And somehow you're thinking this is a threat. Sounds like, you know, people watching Elvis Presley's hips, you know, or rock and roll or hip hop, like, going, that's not real music. And, you guys, you kids, young kids today don't know what you're doing. And it's like, that's kind of like what happens with a lot of this. Like you said, there's a certain level of inevitability, like the tech is going to eat itself because there's no conspiracy like somebody's in charge of it. It is it's going to find value, and then people vote with their dollars and attention. And so unless you can somehow interrupt that, you're just standing in the middle of the train track. That line in the Matrix where Agent Smith holds Neo's head to the train tracks, and he's like, you know what that is? That is the sound of inevitability. And it's like, that's what these moments are. It sounds of inevitability. So part of it is like, you can't control people. So you have to, the best strategy is just to figure out where the cheese is going and move with the cheese and do it as quickly as you can. And don't own like remember the legacy, think about it and appreciate it and kind of go, that was great, but you know what? I'm going to be an early adopter, and I'm going to figure out how to leverage this and be at the front end of these things before anybody else is. And so, and then you experience the shock and awe of this. And so, so when ChatGPT became kind of available back when it really hit for us, it was in December-ish, around Christmas time, when, they opened it up and everybody kind of was able to get an account. Their day 2 getting an account. And I've got my Bard account on Google and all of that. And so you're just getting in early and into the whole thing and just trying to get your perspective and trying to understand the implication of what that is. And so, I had a project about a week ago that I had to do, and I had to reverse engineer a business case study, an application. And so we were trying to teach, we were talking about methodology here today. So in a class, a teacher, has to create, all the resources that to teach the class. And so I had to create all these resources on how to do discovery. And so I needed a business case. And so I didn't have anybody's discovery workshop. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to use ChatGPT for this. And so I took an application that had been finished, done, and developed. And I started at the beginning. Okay, I am and I worked with ChatGPT for about 3 hours. And we had a really great session together, design thinking session, asking about Uberification in a beverage industry. Like, so this customer that had deployed this application was for merchandisers in a beverage industry. And so asking, what are the IT capabilities that I need to have? Because that would have been the question in the room. And then everybody would have come up with different ideas and put them on the sticky board. Okay, here's all the IT risks associated with that. And within 4 hours, I was able to create a board that would have been the result of a design thinking workshop, which would have taken an entire team of people about a day and a half to build. And I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't tell anybody that that's what I did. And so I used that tool to do that. And so I know enough about that industry and that particular thing to have, been in the room to facilitate that workshop. And ChatGPT just was my Greek choir, my Greek chorus, that was able to ask it questions and pretend like because you can tell it like, okay, you are a supervisor, and what is your biggest concern about, like literally it could take on all these different personalities and all these different perspectives. And so I was able to recreate a design thinking session and come up with it. And then at the end of those sessions, you deliver a pitch basically to the executives about the app that, gets developed, that ultimately got developed. Like, what's your 1-page summary? And so I did that whole thing and I presented it to the class, and they're like, that was the best workshop ever, and they were just like, this is the detail you have here, and it just seems so amazing. And it's like, I did that on chat. It is amazing, right? So you walk away from that experience and you just go, holy schmoly, this is like what just happened for me was something that was a mind blower to go, all right, how can I, capitalize on this? Like, now I know that I can really deliver, like I'm using this thing all the time to ask really complicated questions, comparing two, let's say, business models together, or taking a strategy? What's the risks of these different things? Like all the questions that I get asked all the time. I'm asked, you go in there and you use it and it formulates a really nice little answer for you and gives me all the sources and you use a lot of judgment. Like, this is not 100% accurate. And so you're like, okay. And so, you just begin to consider what the implications of that for different people are going to be. Computers are always going to disintermediate. They're always going to, that's the thing. We saw this as soon as Expedia came out, the travel industry is disrupted, right? And all of a sudden, there's no more travel agents. If you're, and I've always said this, if I'm in a job where my only job is listening to somebody in one ear, typing on a computer, and then telling that person what the computer just told me, that job is at risk, period. Always has been and will be. So, now that is shifting over to, information workers. And, for me, I could go, hey, if I had $1 million right now and 5 developers, I could literally develop a consulting workshop in a box that asked literally every one of those questions I asked the thing, and spit out a business analysis of any industry. And this could be completely scripted. What I did could be completely scripted. Like, there's a business right there. So that's the thing. It's like, you can look at that as a threat to me, or I could say, boy, I could capitalize on that. How could I make this really work for me? And I think that's the thing to get out of the way of the train and try to get on the train, like trying to figure out how to get on the carousel. And so I have this conversation all the time with a lot of folks that are in that digital divide space, like folks that don't have access to technology, folks that are older, or because of their economic status and situation don't have that. And we have this inequity in our society that is awful, and we have to figure out how to address that. But the worst way to address it is, to throw stones at the robots. That's not the right thing to do. It's like, how can we change that mindset and go, yeah, if you're on a factory line, you're being replaced by robots. But think about it. Somebody has to fix the robot and install the robot and, oil the robot. They're not self-maintaining. Somebody has to invent the robot. Be that person, figure out how to get there. Get on the train and don't let it run it over you. So that's kind of the framework that I've used for this. I'm not going to judge ChatGTP and go, it's good or bad. It's like ketchup. It's a benign technology that has no brain. There's no grand conspiracy here to take over the world. It's going to have its own thing, and I'm just a peon in the universe. So I just I'm just going to accept it, at the storm, and I'm going to figure out how to find a shelter in the storm, and not ride it out. I'm going to figure out how to harness that wind and go as fast as I can. So.
Well, speaking about voting with your dollars and your attention, where can people find you?
Well, for me, like I said, I have a kind of a thought experiment that I'm doing. It's called thetechnicalseller.com. And that is a podcast that I'm starting. And I'm trying, it's a side hustle. So I'm trying to do my best on trying to be super consistent with it. I've got, I think, about 30 episodes in there. And we've morphed it a little over the year and the year and a half or so that I've been working on it. So yeah, we're just going to continue that kind of conversation. I'm just really fascinated with what are the skill sets that somebody that's either starting in sales or somebody like yourself that's in an organization that's very driven by, like, we don't maybe have dedicated sellers. We don't have a lot of resources just to go do sales. We're going to take our people and do sales. So if I'm an entrepreneur or a small business, I basically have to figure out how to sell now and run my business at the same time. So what are some of those foundational principles that we can adopt and use? And so I try to break it down every week, but with one of the I have about 50 core principles, the pyramid of trust kind of a thing. I have like 50 underlying principles, and so for sales that I've garnered over the years, and every episode I'm trying to dive into one or two of those different ideals. So things like, knowing your product, or what does that really mean? What does that really mean? Or empathy, those types of things. Like what are those? How do I practically deploy those? And then also do sales book reviews. So What are
Right.
books that
Yeah.
are part of our career path that, hey, just read this book and you'll learn something. And what have I learned about
Right.
it? So it's more less a book review, kind of like it was good or bad. It's more like these are, and before YouTube came along, this is how, as a salesperson, you kind of honed your skills. You would go to what
Right.
seminars, or you would read books from salespeople and learn about different methodologies and different techniques and things like that. And so there's a lot of foundational ones that a lot of the older dudes like myself, have, and you garner little tidbits of each one of them, and you incorporate them into your kind of business model and your framework that you like to use. So you kind of make it your own. So,
Well, Pierre, thank you
of
so
course,
much for joining us. We appreciate it.
my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you. Anytime. Anytime.
All right.